Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I thought I would make a video on my made 2019, so all the clothes that I've sewn and worn in 2019 since I got back into this sewing malarkey. So jumping right in with the most complicated make that I made, which was these McCall's M77726 shorts. I used viscose linen in an antique rose colour. Shorts are difficult, trousers are difficult to get the fit right. It was very tricky. Even despite several ridiculous looking toiles that I made, they just never quite fit. And then the other problem was the colour. It's just too similar to my skin colour and it's just not quite right, and honestly I just haven't worn them. So this was a small fail, but I think I just started off too challenging. So I moved on to something a little bit more simple, and this is the Stevie top by Tilly and the Buttons. So you can see I used that viscose linen again for one of the versions, and then I also used a multicoloured cotton lawn, which I really like the pattern of. It's kind of like paint swatches. This is a really easy pattern, and the fit was pretty decent as well, although it is quite boxy because that is the design. It is a pattern for beginners, so there's not many fastenings, pleats, darts, etc. I did have to lower the neckline on the multicoloured one because the pink one, it just felt too high, and I had a slight issue with making the sleeves look neat. And I made this version with tie fastening. There are other options. I then went on to this Scout tee by Grainland. Again, this was in April 2019. This is a t-shirt pattern made for woven fabric rather than knit, and it was really easy to make, but I did make it on the big side. I think this is an American company, and so I wasn't 100% sure of the size, and I just went up, which was a mistake. But I did give the pattern to my mum, who has yet to return it, so I can't actually try it again with the smaller size yet until I get that back. The other thing is that I used a pattern with lobsters all over it, and I absolutely love the lobster pattern. It was made from cotton poplin, if I didn't already say that. So another Tilly and the Buttons pattern. This is the Agnes top, made with jersey. I used a lot of Tilly and the Buttons patterns because I bought a collection of their patterns because you got a better deal. So I ended up with about 6 Tilly and the Button patterns. They were recommended for beginners and they really are easy to work with, so I do also recommend them. I really like the pattern and I wear this t-shirt a lot. The fabric does look like curtains, but that's what I like about it. It has ruched shoulders and a ruched neckline to give it some kind of fun details, but they were the hardest parts to get neat because I was still learning how to sew with knits. And to be honest with you, I still am learning how to sew. I do still find it a bit tricky. This was also a Tilly and the Buttons pattern, and this was the Dominique Skirt. I used blue chambray denim fabric, and it required a lot of fabric, like 2.5 meters, which was a lot for me. Obviously that adds to the cost when you're making it, but it's cut on the bias, which is why it requires so much. It has a lot of swoosh to it as a result, which is fun, and I wore it on holiday in Japan where knee length skirts are really the thing. Nobody wears shorts. It was pretty easy to sew, and the pattern advises you can use a ribbon to make belt loops, but they did fray and rip really easily, and the belt itself is far too long, so that's my only kind of critique of the pattern. Another April make, and this was the Zara Dress, again by Tilly and the Buttons, and I used Ponte di Roma fabric. The black fabric in the side panels and the shoulders was horrible to sew. It seemed like a very close weave and it was just a nightmare. The multicoloured fabric, on the other hand, was a lot easier to sew, and that was absolutely fine. The finished product, unfortunately, was just way too big for me, even though I used the same size in this as I did in all the other Tilly and the Button patterns, so I'm not exactly sure what went on there. And there were a lot of points where there were several pieces of fabric being sewn together, and they have already kind of opened up with little holes under the armpits, so that's kind of annoying. This was another Stevie top, as I already showed you before, but this was in July 2019, and I used this fun bumblebee cotton I cannot read my writing. Cotton poplin, and then, no wait, that's cotton lawn, sorry. And then I didn't have enough of the bee fabric, so I had to use some cotton poplin in the plain blue, which I used for the back and also for the pocket that you can see. And I added the pocket on, which I hadn't done for the previous versions, just to add a bit of a detail. And instead of the tie fastening at the back, I used a button and loop, which I preferred because it's a bit less fussy and easier to sew. This was also in July, and this was the Cocoa top by Tilly and the Buttons, and I used textured jersey. I'm not sure if this was really a success, but I wanted to try the pattern and the fabric was really fun, and it's textured, which is quite fun and interesting. I hadn't worked with textured fabric before. The pattern wasn't really hard to put together, but the fit was weird. It kind of flares out and it was too long for a jumper. I think there's also a dress version as well. I made it shorter and I made it too short, which was my bad, and I just could not figure out how to wear the funnel neck thing. I just couldn't get to grips with that. This was another Agnes top by Tilly and the Buttons, and I used some fabric which I think was probably, it must be jersey, but it was leftover fabric that I've had for ages, so I don't know where it came from. And I did want to make a kind of sportier version than the previous versions, so I quite liked the contrast of the bright orange and the blue and white stripes, and I think the orange neckline really pulled it together as well. I didn't add the ruching on the neckline, but I did keep it on the shoulders, just because I didn't think that I could get the ruching on the neckline neat enough given the colour of the fabric and also my sewing ability. This is the Agnes top again. This is made from viscose jersey, and this was August 2019. And I decided to make the long sleeve version because even though it's August, it's no guarantee of warm weather, so you still might want a long sleeve version. I bought two different colourways, one with pink and one with a green stripe, so that I could have a contrast between the sleeves and the body. And this was my first attempt at having to colour match or try and match up the stripes. And I made it harder for myself than I needed to, I think, because I'd never done it before, so I was making it up. So my colour matching does still need some work. The fabric is a little thin and the seams have started coming undone, unfortunately, but I think that might be my sewing or the strength of my thread rather than anything to do with the fabric. This is September 2019 and it's a leopard viscose lawn, and it's another Dominique skirt. I loved and wore loads my chambray Dominique skirt, so I decided I wanted some more long skirts, especially for autumn, and I do enjoy leopard print. So this fabric was drapier and stretchier than I'd used before, and it was a little bit harder to work with, and I think that I must have stretched it as I sewed it, and as a result it's puckered slightly, but it's still great to wear. I did omit the belt this time, and I do prefer it without the belt because, as I said before, it was a bit too long for me anyway. The other skirt I made around the same time was the Everyday Skirt by Liesl & Co. I really felt that I needed to branch out from Tilly and the Buttons pattern, so this is why I bought this Everyday Skirt pattern. Jeans and trousers are just too uncomfortable to wear and awkward to make. I am really happy with the finished result, but making it was a little bit tricky. I used a digital PDF download and I struggled to set the printout at the correct percent. I did eventually manage it, but I struggled with actually getting it out. I also found it awkward to read the PDF instructions on my laptop at the same time as sewing, and the instructions weren't super clear, so I relied a lot on the pictures rather than the words, which is a little bit frustrating. Moving on to November 2019, and this is the Lion sweater from I Am Patterns. I'm pretty sure that's what they're called. I needed some cold weather clothes, so I bought this fun sweatshirting with these little people on for the Lion pattern, which has kind of poofy shoulders and long cuffs, and also it has 3 kind of poppers on the left shoulder. I'm really pleased with the fabric, and it was pretty easy to put together, although I didn't realise the pattern was for a serger. It didn't seem to make much difference though. Again, I used the pictures in the pattern a lot rather than the written instructions. They weren't that great, but the words were actually harder to understand. The pattern comes in French and English, and the French version has centimetres and the English version has inches, so at times it tells you to measure things like 3/16 of an inch, which just boggled my brain. I do like the finished product, but it did end up being a little bit on the large side. So when I moved on to its kind of sister pattern, which is the zebra version, which is very similar, except instead of having poofy shoulders, it kind of has poofy wrists, I suppose, but it also has the poppers on the side. I decided to make a smaller size, but this fabric actually has less stretch in it, so it's actually ended up being a little bit tight, especially around the waist and the cuffs. Also, the poppers that I've put on it, because I do have to open them to put the jumper on in this version, which I don't have to do with the Lion version because that's bigger and I can just pull it over my head, they have actually kind of come undone and kind of come out, and I think that's just because the fabric's quite thick. and they weren't actually able to go through all the layers of the fabric successfully, which is probably the same with the lion sweater. I just didn't realise it. So I'm not quite sure what to do with that now, because it's kind of in a state of needing repair, which is a bit frustrating. My other issue with it is that I really don't like the colour of this fabric, and I really wish that I'd got a different shade. On the website I thought it looked a little bit more like a reddish brown, but it isn't, and I just don't like it. It just seems a bit drab. But anyway, that is my roundup of all the clothes that I've made this year. I'm pretty impressed with the number that I've made, but also the fact that many of these are staples in my wardrobe that I wear regularly, or at least I did in the summer when it was warmer, and now I kind of moved on to wearing the more cold weather clothes regularly, and I'm really pleased. So I'm looking forward to 2020 and more sewing to come, hopefully. I just need to kind of get my head down and think about what I actually need in my wardrobe and what I actually want to make, and using up some of the fabric that I've accumulated, because that is my big issue, is that even though I'm trying to use the guide on the patterns as to how much fabric I'll need, I still somehow always end up with loads left over at the end. So I may end up just having to make an entire wardrobe in leopard print, an entire wardrobe in, blue stripes or whatever. But if that's the case, that's the case. Anyway, I hope you liked the video. I hope that you've enjoyed seeing some of the sewing that I've been doing this year, and I hope that you have also been creating your own masterpieces that you can actually wear out and about every day as well. If you have liked the video, please give me a like. If you would like to see more videos like this, please subscribe. And if you have any thoughts or suggestions on patterns or fabric shops, please leave them in the comments.